Hello everyone, welcome to the spoiler talk for Blade 2. Man, is this movie really good. Like, there's one thing in this movie that I actually did not see coming because I had completely forgotten about it. But the way that they deal with it, I'm a big fan of that. Anyway, so it has been 2 years, and apparently there's a guy who goes to the blood bank, and turns out he's a vampire, and he also hates vampires. So, yeah, our main bad guy, Jared, everyone, the man from Subway himself. But Blade has been searching for the past 2 years for Whistler, and he attacks a vampire gang and also finds a guy named Rush in there who he lets live for now because he found Whistler and he is inside of a red cocoon type of thing. So Blade frees him, takes him back home. We also meet Scott there and he gives Whistler like a special dose, and then he's like, tomorrow I'm gonna open up the blinds, and if you die, you die. So he walks off. Later on, he comes back, opens the thing up, and turns out, I guess Whistler's now cured. Like, he was bitten in the last movie. At least that's what they implied. So he's cured now? Okay, sure. I guess he's cured. Like, I don't know. They never really reference this again. Like, it doesn't even matter. It's just Del Toro wanted Whistler back, so he just thought of a reason to bring him back. However, Whistler doesn't like Scud. However, we can't really focus too much on that because of the fact that there are some ninja vampires who attack us. And apparently they come from the Fire Nation. I mean Vampire Nation. And apparently they want a truce, and also the leader of the Vampire Nation wants a meeting with Blade. So we head over there. However, we are still armed to the teeth, obviously, as we do. And we meet the Maskinos, the leader of the Vampire Nation. And he talks to us about a worse enemy being out there called the Reapers. And apparently they can turn vampires into Reapers. And he wants Blade to lead the Blood Pack, where we meet everyone. Which, yeah, none of them are really important. However, Blade is able to actually put a bomb on the back of Reinhardt, so that's nice. And Blade also accepts becoming leader of the team because he has to. There is no other shot that they have. And like I said before about the bombing of Reinhardt, I do like the fact that he instantly just shows off that he is just the best of the best. So now we need to figure out a way in order to draw out good old Subway Man and kill him. And we do that by going to a vampire spot called the House of Pain. And when we get there, Blade is like, this one doesn't really look like a vampire spot. Like, yeah, but because of your hunting, we had to get a little bit creative, so we used some invisible paint. So they go inside in order to search for good old Subway Man. However, they can't really find him, and there's a fun exchange between Blade and Reinhardt where they both have guns pointed at each other. I like that, good old rivalry. But then the Reapers appear, so now we have the Blood Pack versus the Reapers, and it is a really good showdown overall. However, sadly enough, the tattoo guy, who I do not remember the name of, gets bit. However, he lies about it, so that's a bit of a problem. Also, turns out, surprise, surprise, these Reapers are immune to everything that has to do with vampires. Silver doesn't work. Garlic doesn't work. Nothing works until Scott uses his lights on his van and it burns one of them. And it's like, okay, so the UV lights work. So they're still weak to sunlight. They've just decided to abandon all other weaknesses. So now we have to fight them using the UV lights, and we are able to win. Sadly enough, we do lose Priest, and technically we also lose Tattoo Guy, who is, well, he's kind of hiding it. So we'll lose him later on. Also, Blade has a bit of a battle with Jared, and the serum that I guess came from the last movie, yeah, that doesn't work anymore. So he's also immune to the serum. He is literally only weak to sunlight. Also, the lawyer, which, by the way, when the lawyer gets introduced, I actually did laugh out loud. I did actually lol. And that is the fact that Blade is like, you're a human. He's like, well, almost. I'm a lawyer. It's like, yeah. Yeah. Those are scum of the earth, basically. Except for 1, 2, Matthew, and Foggy, obviously. They are not scum of the earth, but the rest of them can burn. Because I don't think Karen really counts as a lawyer, so, yeah, the rest of them can just burn. But apparently, the Maskinos is willing to sacrifice everyone, including his daughter, for some kind of plan. Apparently, he's hiding something. And yes, indeed, he is technically our main bad guy, but not really. I mean, don't worry about it. Mr. Subway himself is still our main bad guy, but this is not a good guy that we can trust. However, we have caught a Reaper thanks to Whistler abandoning his post. So now Nisa examines the Reaper, and we learn the fact that apparently it has like a heart casing around its heart so that you cannot penetrate it with a stake, because they're technically not immune to being stabbed with silver or wood, I guess. I don't know, but silver anyway. They're not immune to that. However, they have like a protection around their hearts, so they are immune to that now. But there is a slight opening on the side that becomes very important later on. Also, we learn the fact that even though the brain is officially confirmed to be dead, the body still wants to feed, even though it cannot feed. So literally, these things do not die unless, I guess, you stab it in the heart, which is gonna be difficult, or you use lights. However, problem is, the rest of the team is a bit weak to lights outside of Blade. And to be honest, I feel like Blade should have been like, that's not my problem, though. But he then never says anything like that. He's just like, put on some sunscreen, boys. We're going hunting in the daylight. Apparently, that's the next plan. Also, Whistler and Scott make a UV bomb in order to be able to, well, if you can beat them, bomb them and all that stuff. So we go into the sewers because of the fact that these things are still weak to sunlight, which means that they need places to hide. And what better place than with the Ninja Turtles themselves? So we go into the sewers and we split up a little bit. However, turns out that Chupa, which I think actually was the name, he doesn't like Whistler. Same, by the way, with Reinhardt, but Reinhardt leaves before anything can happen, and Chupa attacks Whistler. Also, Lighthammer's turned and he killed another one of our members. I forgot who, couldn't remember. And then afterwards, he goes after the redhead girl. However, she tries to climb up the stairs and opens up the manhole cover in order to let sunlight come in. So basically, she sacrifices herself in order to kill Lighthammer. So things are going horribly wrong. Also, it turns out that these bat boys are inside of the water of the sewers. And fun fact, the lever stuck on the super bomb that we have. So that's a bit of a problem. So Blade saves Nisa. However, one of the other guys, the earlier guys, the one who was with Nisa in order to get us to the Vampire Nation, he dies, and Blade is able to save Nisa and kill all of the Reapers. However, now we have to regroup. So we regroup the three of them that are still left. Also, Whistler has been using the pheromones in order to lure over Reapers in order to kill Chupa, which actually works. So Blade has a new plan. He is going to become a lure, basically. He is going to lure everyone to the bomb, the super bomb, and he's gonna blow it up. Meanwhile, Reinhardt and Nisa, they are gonna try and get out of the sewers because this is a kind of bomb that will go through the sewer. So, yeah, no matter where you are in the sewer, you are not really safe. So Blade goes over to the bomb. Turns out it's stuck, which Reinhardt didn't say because he is an actual prick. And Reinhardt and Nisa have some problems escaping because they get entirely surrounded by Reapers. So Blade eventually is able to activate the bomb. It blows up with UV lights going through everywhere. Apparently, Reinhardt and also Nisa, they went underwater in order to hide from the big explosive. And everyone is dead. Yay, we won! We did it, boys! Pats on the backs for everyone. A free masturbation for the whole squad. But it turns out we did not really win because of the fact that we then get betrayed by Reinhardt. And the lawyer is here as well. So it turns out that Damaskinos wasn't such a good guy. Also, Nomak finds Whistler and he wants him to tell Blade the truth. Also, Blade heads over to Nisa in order to heal her before the betrayal happens, but they all get betrayed, sadly enough. So everyone gets caught. Turns out our main bad guy kind of was also Damaskinos. He apparently designed the Reapers, and Nomak was a failure, and also his son, because he was trying to prevent future generations of vampires from being weak. He was basically trying to create more blades, but then evil blades. And apparently he experimented on his son, and that was not really such a good idea. And also during this exchange, it seems like Nisa did not know that Nomak was her brother. But then later on, it feels like she should have known. So that is a bit of a writing problem that might exist. Maybe I misheard anything. So then Blade is like, all right, Reinhardt, I'm gonna explode the bomb on the back of your head. But turns out it's a dud because of the fact that Scott was part of the bad guys all along. He was one of their followers. I don't know what was that called again. The familiars, I think it actually was. He was one of their familiars, so that's a bit of a problem. However, apparently Blade knew all along that he was a familiar, and he's like, it's not a dud, and then he blows him up. And I actually found this funny. I found it hilarious because he's like, Blade, I turned one over on you. No, you did not. It's a real bomb. Boom, gone. It's like the betrayal instantly gets cut short. However, then Blade gets attacked obviously by the rest of the people because of the fact that you do not attack one of their own. And Blade gets taken to a special room where once again they have to take Blade's DNA. And I'm like, this is my biggest problem. This is why I couldn't give the movie a 10 out of 10, because it's a repeat of the last movie in a way. In the last movie, in order to become this vampire god, they had needed Blade's blood. But now, in order to create perfect beings, they're gonna study Blade, and once again they need Blade. It's like, is that gonna happen in the next movie as well? Is Dracula gonna want Blade as well? Because the fact that will make him perfect or whatever. Because, spoiler warning, the next villain is actually Dracula. But basically, Blade gets put on this table, and he gets a bunch of silver spikes through his body. And basically, they're gonna study his blood, but also they're gonna study everything else once they get the chance to. And also, Whistler is going to get beaten up by Reinhardt. However, he is able to free himself from the handcuffs, which I think are actually silver, so they could be used, but whatever. Doesn't matter. Whistler attacks Reinhardt and gets the advantage and is able to escape, grabs Blade's weapons, and then hides and moves through like a air duct or whatever you want to call it. In order to get to Blade's room, kills the guy that is there, and then frees Blade. And then afterwards, he carries Blade because apparently there was a gigantic bloodbath that was just there. So we're taking him over to the bloodbath, but Reinhardt's still alive and starts shooting at them. So Blade climbs, falls into the bloodbath. He is healed, and then he goes over and kills a bunch of different vampires, and eventually also Reinhardt as well. Very nice. Also, before that, Blade said Nomak, and the lawyer guy was like, Nomak doesn't know our location, and Blade's like, he does now. So Nomak breaks in order to attack Papa himself, and that is why Whistler was also able to escape, because of the whole land of confusion. Also, Nisa is not really happy about the big revelation that was just revealed, so that is going to be a bit problematic for Daddy Dearest. However, Daddy and Nisa are able to escape from Nomak for the time being. However, then Nisa later on betrays Daddy Dearest by locking him into a room, and then we have Nomak who appears, and he gives his dad a hug, and then he kills him. However, he's not gonna turn him into a Reaper. Instead, he's gonna save that for his sister. However, when he said you were always his favorite, I'm like, so does Nisa know that you were her brother or not? Because before it felt like she didn't know, but now it feels like she does know. I'm a bit confused about that one. Doesn't matter. He drinks her. However, then Blade comes in and he has a bit of a fight, and it's a pretty cool fight. Yes, it does use some CGI that doesn't look the best, but overall it is a pretty cool fight, and it eventually ends when Blade, who does not have the upper hand in the battle, he actually loses a lot. He grabbed his blade, he has a piece of it, and he stabs that into Nomak's heart, and Nomak is like, the pain is gone. I'm like, there's a blade inside of you. What do you mean the pain is gone? But then he pushes the blade in further and dies. And then afterwards, Nisa's like, Blade, please show me the sunlight. So he picks her up and takes her outside, where she gets killed by the sunlight. However, outside is also where Whistler is, so I guess that officially confirms that he is not a vampire in this movie. I don't know. It felt like a weird plot point that they just did so that they could bring back Whistler. It's so weird. But anyway, Nisa is now dead. The whole ancient council of Vampire Nation is now dead as well, so we can return home in order to continue on with the attacks on the vampires, starting of course with the how the movie ends, and that is in London. We get the return of the Rush guy from earlier in the movie, and Blade is like, told you I didn't forget about you, and kills him. And that's how the movie ends. So Blade is back to hunting vampires, and man, this movie was so much better. Yes, I had some issues here and there. Like I said, small problems. Like, for example, the whole, we need Blade's blood again. Or at least his body again. We need him again. It's like, oh, man, that's a bit of a repeat from the last movie. And also, the really rushed way to bring Whistler back, which feels like was never the plan to begin with, but now I guess it is. Those are the two problems that I have with the movie, but I can also kind of ignore it because the rest of the movie is really cool. So that's why it gets a 9 out of 10 and not a 10 out of 10. These would have been spoilers in this regular review, so I decided to reveal them here. But overall, like I said, this was a really good movie. So let me know what you guys thought about Blade in the comment section down below. And with that being said, thank you all so very much for watching, and I do hope you guys have enjoyed. And if you did, please like button, subscribe if you're new, or haven't done so already, turn on notifications. Don't forget to check out the Let's Play channel link in the description and at the end of the video. And I'll see you guys next time when we finish this up with a dot. Bye!